How's it going, everyone? In today's video, we're basically going to be looking at how to create those like Synthy Arps and textures. And the reference I'm using for this one, if you didn't guess from the intro, is Sweely. And what I've basically tried to do is like recreate one of his tracks, This on Dance Floor, and basically try and add different textures. So this song I'll talk about in a minute, but this song is kind of like quite stripped back, quite basic drums, like a groovy bass line, but relatively simple. And I've kind of picked this song because it has a lot of room to add stuff. He's kind of kept it quite simple, and with this track and a lot of his tracks, when you listen to them, you'll notice like some of them are driven by effects and like ear candy and that kind of thing. So I tend to think of these sounds as they could be like effects, but they could also be like synthy arpeggiated parts and like textures and that kind of thing. Basically like ear candy, which doesn't always dominate the mix, but it's an interesting kind of aspect to focus on anyway. So I'll just kind of play the track alongside my kind of recreation, and we can kind of talk through like the sound that we're going to be looking at today. So that's like chord, drums, bass. I think there's like a texture coming up. Basically the bits of ear candy, just listen out to these. It's here. There, that's the one. So that kind of like texture in the background there. So this song isn't the best example for like if you want to actually hear the place that those textures might have in his tracks. I definitely recommend the Closer Energy album he did. You'll hear a lot of this like ear candy spread throughout, but it is quite a nice track to reference for this type of tutorial because there's definitely loads of room to add our own kind of texture sounds in to basically demonstrate the purpose of them. So that kind of texture he's used as like an effects type sound, but I'll just kind of show like my examples. Basically I've got a few favorite plugins to create these kinds of sounds, and it's relatively easy to actually like create them. So the plugin we're going to be focusing on is called Blue 2 by Rob Papin, and I'll just play all the different sounds. I'll just run through all these and then we'll kind of do our own, just to basically show the technique. So we don't need the reference track anymore. You'll see from the effects chain how it's moving around. We'll go into that. So that's one sound. Go for this one. It's like an alarm type sound. And then we'll go into these ones. I've basically placed them throughout because when they're playing all at once, it gets a bit too much. And next we have this one. Kind of like a drone. And we have this kind of one, where the melody is a bit, kind of like a bit more like a lead. I'll just turn it up. And then we finally have this one. And I'll also turn that up. I can hear it, but I'm not sure if you can. And I'll just play these in context. So I've basically got all these kind of like textures, which when you look at the MIDI for a lot of them, like this for example, the MIDI's very simplistic. It's basically just a case of holding a note. So for this, I'm just holding C, the root note. And I've got a bit creative with regards to like the note length and the placement, but a lot of them are just really simple melodies, like this one up here. Just like kind of like legato melodies. This one's just the one note. And then this one up here is also just the one note. So this is kind of where I want to start. Basically, the plugin I like using most of these kind of sounds is called Bluetooth. And there's a few other ones I'll talk about in a bit, but it's basically Bluetooth, and you've essentially, within certain plugins, you've got these kind of like ARP banks, and I think with Bluetooth you can use other stuff like tempo-based sequence sounds and those kind of banks, but these banks are basically good because they enable you. I'll just take the effects chain off. They enable you to hold down one note and get some like kind of like rhythmic pattern. And then, so these sounds sound quite good already, but when you like start to play them along with your beat, they can be quite interesting. So it's basically like an easy way to kickstart an idea if you've got all like the basic elements in. So for this one, I've literally just got the C. And what I've done is I've found a good place right here. But what I can basically do is just start skimming through ideas. So I'll just go back to the one I had before. So that's a good like kind of ear candy texture kind of sound. And with the sound design you can even go further, and you can, as you'll see, the different kind of waves that are on, you can basically refine the sound further if you don't like the sound of something, because some of them are quite metallic and like they'll have like drums and stuff in them. So if you want more of like the kind of timbre of a synth, you might turn them off and that kind of thing. So I like this and this. So it works quite well. And then basically what I would do, there's no like rules when it comes to effects train, but I quite like adding movement, so like the LFO map to a filter can be quite a good one. So it's like basically evolving over time. Because you kind of want them to be quite natural sounds. And then I've just got like random other effects, which we'll not get into because it doesn't really matter. You can get creative with these chains. I've got that, and then I've got more or less got the same thing with a different preset. So kind of the fun kind of starts a lot with these sounds when you basically just start layering, and you basically just take a keyboard and you just start playing along with. So I always like to just start with the root note of C, and basically what I would do is I would just hold C, and then you can start like getting creative with your like slicing, because you don't want every layer to look something like this, because it'll just get really messy. And I have a feeling if you were to look inside one of Sweely's projects, I have a feeling there would be a lot of like chopped up MIDI slices like this, and with the basic elements above. So you can kind of think of these as like effects, and then if you want like a more prominent textural line which kind of lasts throughout the bar, you could maybe consider having something a bit more legato like that. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video. Just a quick one to let you know that I have some exciting news, and that is that we're going to be making a return to the Sounds Like Artists series. And the reason I interrupt this video is because I'm pleased to announce that that fourth artist of the series is actually going to be on Sweely. So for those unfamiliar, I typically will do like a sample pack and like various tutorials and project files based on this artist. So I just wanted to let you know and give you the heads up, and that will be coming hopefully very soon. If you want to know more about it and be one of the first people to know when it's actually live, then I'll leave a link below for you to like opt into the mailing list. And yeah, anyway, let's just get back to the video. Then I've kind of found a preset which is once again kind of like that texture, but this trick of like playing just the root note can get quite boring. So kind of trying to spice up these textures because the sounds are really nice in themselves, to basically have like different MIDI. Maybe like in the chord, so you could like follow the, sorry, in the key, so you could follow the chord. That's just kind of what I've done here. You see the chord there, and it's kind of an interesting pattern, this, because I wouldn't think of like Sweely straight away, but I could see something along these kind of lines. And then finally we've basically got the kind of same thing. This is like a kind of like a chord, and you'll see the effects chains remain pretty similar, with just moving filters mostly and some variation. and I'll just play the whole thing. So I've basically got these kind of textures in the breakdown when we think about arrangement, but very few of them in the drop, kind of like as SFX.
You like that?
And then this is a very rough arrangement, but I basically just experimented with bringing these sounds in and out. And like I said, I've got the full kind of bars here, but the kind of beauty of these sounds is you can literally just go like this and then slice. So you'll see what I've done here, where I've basically more or less done that, but muted certain things. The muted ones are more or less the ones with potential still, but you could literally just drag it out, and you could press Command E to slice, and then just delete that, or delete that, keep that, and get creative with how they interact with each other, kind of like question and answer. So there's loads of like potential with these sounds, but it's just so easy to program the MIDI for them, because you can literally start with the one note, and because they're sequenced, because these patterns are arpeggiated here, the play mode's on arpeggiator or sequencer, depending on what bank you choose. Like I said, art banks, tempo, sequence sounds, they're all from memory pretty good ones. And there's other plugins as well you can use. So two of my other favorite ones for this are Omnisphere and the Arturia Mini V, both which have like arpeggiated sequenced presets. But if you don't find yourself with one of those plugins, an easy way to get something similar is to load the arpeggiator on 16ths beforehand, and then make sure the mode's on something like one of these, and then let the arpeggiator play. So you don't have to just use these plugins, but these are my preferred ones. And then you can literally just keep the arpeggiator on or record the MIDI, and you could maybe even use arpeggiators in combination with sequencers to get something similar. So don't worry if you don't have that. So the MIDI is pretty simple, but these plugins have like really nice sounds, and it helps when they already have like the arpeggiator sequences built in, but you can use your own sequences. Like, you don't have to just use these. So that's just in case anyone doesn't have these plugins. But I would very much recommend Blue 2 if I had to recommend a go-to. So the MIDI is pretty simple. The sound itself is pretty easy as well, because you can literally just find these banks and kind of blend them in with the original kind of main elements. And then, like I was saying, the audio effects are also pretty basic, like just trying to get stuff moving and evolving. So those are kind of like the layers I set up previously. And finally, I guess we'll just like basically do our own example, just because I know people like seeing stuff from scratch. So just to show, I have this kind of line here. I'll get rid of these. I basically have this line here, just playing a C. You can basically audition, like play back at different octaves, but basically just hold the note of the key you're in. It doesn't have to be C. And then what I've done is I've basically found some nice presets. So I've gone for like an acid preset, but just to show you, I could go into blue again and I could literally just, and I'll audition it with some other sounds for context, because that's always important. And let's go to, I'll take the effects off as well. The sequence sounds and then tempo based ones. So you could do it with like a lot of the different sounds, and some of them, not all of them are sequenced or like arpeggiated. As you'll see, this to change to poly. I could then load an arpeggiator, and I could play around with these kind of settings. Maybe I'll do up and down. So stuff like that. I'd very much recommend looking through the different banks and seeing what you can come up with. Remember, you can change them to the arpeggiator, or you can use that mode. And Omnisphere is more or less the same. It doesn't even have to be like melodic. It can literally be, I'm trying to remember. Got these arpeggiated ones. I'll get rid of that because it's doing my head in. That's quite cool. I'll turn it off for after it's played. So you can see kind of like the potential with these sounds. A lot of them you have to kind of use sparingly, kind of how I did before where I slice them up. Because you don't want them playing throughout, you kind of want them to be like those bits of ear candy. Let's try with the effects chain. So Blue 2 and Omnisphere are very nice plugins to use. For this, because I've already spoke about Blue 2 a lot, we'll change to this other one I recommended, the Mini V. I've basically just gone to this sequence section and found a nice sequence, yet again, one that you can just hold a note on. If I turn it on, you'll see it's actually showing the notes. And something you can do to spice up some of these patterns is you can like play around with the chord. So you can like basically choose the notes the kind of arpeggiated sequence kind of covers. You'll see it moves to 7. And then it starts covering the 7th. Which would be the G. So you can see the G there. So you can basically affect the sequence using like the chord device, which is also something else that's quite cool. So there's loads of like MIDI things you can do. But basically I've got this sound here, which is quite full on. And I've got like a rough effects chain, so could have this. Like bandpass it to kind of make the sound less prominent. And I could use some of like my go-tos, which I'll just quickly cover, so like your filter freak. We'll just loop this. So, a big part of like Sweely's music is like, it's very minimal. He does the kind of small things very well, and there's like very subtle, intricate details. So, you hardly want, you have to be careful with the sounds you pick and the way you process them, because you hardly want this playing throughout. It's like his music isn't really like acid driven, like on the techno side of the spectrum anyway. So you basically have to be quite careful with the sounds you use, and filtering is a good way to do that, as well as adding like filter movement. So I could use like Filter Freak, I could use FabFilter's Volcano plugin. We'll just look at now, which is very cool for like adding filter movement with like different bands and stuff. So basically like making your sounds kind of move in and out of being audible is kind of like what I'd look to do. This one, I've introduced this one before. Survey, Max for Live. You can basically, it's basically like a step sequencer, so I can control different parameters using different steps. So every step it will be a different value. So if I don't want it to be as prominent in the mix, I could literally put it down to like the lower values and have it move up. Ignore me, I was on the wrong one. So I can do all that. So that's like different processing and I can do, and there's all sorts, and that's kind of like the creative fun that you can have with these kind of sounds. But something I would maybe consider giving a try, instead of keeping these MIDI layers all the time, is basically just like resampling the sequence out, which basically gives you the freedom to manipulate it further in audio form, because when you have it in that sequence, you basically have to, the sequence basically starts when you play it. So like when it's here, the sequence will start, and when it's here, it'll start at the same point every time. You couldn't like skip the first sequence unless you went into the synth and edited it manually, if it gave you that option. So something that I'd always kind of recommend, particularly with like texture sounds, is putting them into audio and manipulating them further there. So I could keep this in audio and I could chop it up. Let's just listen to what it sounds like. So it's quite hectic, which isn't really what I would want. So I definitely would be looking to basically take the slices and see how it fits with the original. Let's just see if I can like randomly do something. This might sound garbage, but we'll just quickly addition it. So you kind of see the potential there, like if I was to go in and further manipulate it and move it to different positions. It kind of sounds what I was talking about this bit like. So I could literally slice it so it kind of has that same kind of rhythm. So it's like, you have to kind of think of these kind of sounds as like ear candy essentially. So if I wanted to make it a lot more subtle, I could be even more subtle than that. Turn the snare and clap on. So you're basically taking these little segments and they basically become these kind of like glitches, which you almost put in similar places to like your percussions on the offbeats maybe, or something like that, where like the main elements don't occupy. So you'll see the difference between having that full sound. So if I quickly go back, it's that exact slicing I've done is essentially the same reason I've sliced those kind of MIDI loops and MIDI parts up. It's because I don't want them to play frequently, and the only exception to that really is these kind of filler parts in the breakdown, and these as well, but it is a very rough arrangement, so I'd probably be looking to do more of what I've done here, where I've sliced up the chops, chopped up the slices, you know what I mean? But so those kind of like long sequence sounds basically give you loads of options when it comes to slicing up. And if you didn't want to kind of slice it manually, another thing you could do is basically drop it into sampler. I've got this one, which is roughly the same from earlier. So I've got this sampler here, and I'll just put it on. I've got that. And if I wanted, I could do like different one-shots. And these sounds have like a really nice characteristic to them, which is a lot of the reason why I like that plugin. It's kind of like pad sounds. When you literally move this marker, you can get a wide variety of different sounds that you can use. So you could go into the synth and resample, or you could actually literally just find a sample that's kind of similar to this, where there's like loads of different extras within them. Preferably the longer sounds, because those are the ones that kind of vary more. So I could do that, but the thing I like to do, I demonstrated it on like synth loops in the manipulating synths video is slicing. And then that basically kind of does what I'd done with the moving this around, but it chops the whole sample up, and it means I can literally just play different keys on the keyboard. Which is, you kind of hear like the different textural percussive sounds it can create. And then put the processing back on. And finally, so I can play in the notes, kind of how you like program percussion, where you go in and literally So because I've chose quite an acidy pattern, a lot of the sounds are quite, you can hear them really well, and it's almost like you've cranked the resonance up, which I think I have in this case. When I crank the resonance up, you can really hear it. Like it's basically, how I think of it is taking the filter and essentially these sounds anyway, the way they sound, the resonance was probably cranked quite high on the original sound, but I almost think of these sounds as basically being something like this. You've basically got that kind of characteristic on each of them, which is kind of why I was saying, like, do consider the sounds you choose. I've got this, and then I would just simply load a kind of sequencer, program the notes, and leave some gaps because I don't want it to be constant. It's not that kind of genre. So the gate is very important. And then I'd probably repeat the process. I'd resample that and then cut it up, because we're basically trying to add these kind of subtle details as opposed to having things that can completely take over the mix. That's kind of like the purpose of these synthy textures and the arps. These kind of patterns, they're kind of meant to be ear candy, kind of similar to how you do like effects. So they're very easy patterns to implement, and I hope this kind of tutorial is basically giving you a bit of insight into how to create these sounds. So yeah, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you kind of found it useful and learned a lot more about how to create those kind of synthy arps and textures that you hear in a lot of music like Sweely, for example. If you enjoyed, be sure to let us know what you thought, and if there's any videos you want in the future, and be sure to subscribe for more videos. And if you want to, be sure to check out the website for like different resources like sample packs and project files and that kind of thing to see if there's anything you fancy. Otherwise, I'll leave that one there, and I'll catch you in the next one.
You like that? You like that?